I remember the hum. Not the literal hum of the server racks in the climate-controlled data center, but the metaphorical one. It was the thrum of a perfectly tuned engine, the collective energy of 100 brilliant minds converging on a single, audacious goal. At Apex Solutions, we weren't just writing code. We were composing a symphony of finance and technology called Project Catalyst. And I, Leo Hayes, was the conductor. For 6 years, I had poured my life into the firm. I started as a junior quantitative analyst and rose to become the lead architect of our proprietary algorithmic trading platform. Catalyst wasn't just fast, it was intuitive. It used a predictive modeling engine I had personally designed, one capable of learning from market volatility in real time. It was my magnum opus, the culmination of a decade of expertise in high-frequency trading and machine learning. My team and I had worked ourselves to the bone, fueled by coffee camaraderie and the shared belief that we were building the future of fintech. Our CEO, David Shaw, was a visionary. He saw the potential in Catalyst from day one, shielding my team from the more rapacious elements of corporate bureaucracy. Our relationship was built on mutual respect. He understood the art of what we did, and I respected his ability to steer the ship. The atmosphere was electric. We were on the brink of something monumental, a $2 billion acquisition by Global Bancorp. It's one of the largest investment banks on the planet. Catalyst was the crown jewel of the deal, the sole reason Global Bancorp was willing to pay such a staggering premium. The only discordant note in our symphony was Mark Foster, our Chief Operating Officer. Mark was a masterpiece of corporate sculpture, impeccably dressed, unnervingly charismatic, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He spoke in a language of synergistic value and leveraged assets, a dialect foreign to the engineers in the trenches. He saw Catalyst not as a technological marvel, but as a golden parachute, his personal ticket to the C-suite at Global Bancorp post-acquisition. He treated my team with a kind of patronizing bonhomie, as if we were clever children who'd built a remarkable toy he would now graciously sell for the adults. The betrayal, when it came, wasn't a dramatic backstabbing in a boardroom. It was quiet, insidious, and executed with surgical precision. It started with a minor anomaly during a pre-acquisition stress test. For a flicker of a microsecond, a data ingestion module reported a rounding error under extreme load. It was a non-issue, a statistical ghost that my team patched within an hour. But for Mark, it was an opportunity. He convened a code-red emergency meeting with David and the board liaisons from Global Bancorp. My lead engineer and I were summoned, walking into the sterile, glass-walled conference room to find Mark pacing in front of a whiteboard, its expression a mask of grave concern. "Gentlemen," Mark began, his voice resonating with manufactured solemnity, "I've uncovered a serious, potentially catastrophic vulnerability within Project Catalyst." He projected a snippet of code onto the massive 8K display. It was a complex subroutine, but he highlighted a single innocuous-looking line. "This," he declared, pointing with a laser pen, "is a backdoor, a hidden kill switch." I felt a cold laugh bubble in my chest. It was absurd. "Mark, that's not a backdoor," I explained, trying to keep the condescension out of my voice. "That's a debug hook left over from an early build. It's completely inert on the production server. We left it in for diagnostic purposes during development. The anomaly we saw was unrelated, a simple floating point error in a downstream library." Mark held up a hand. "Leo, I appreciate your perspective, but my sources tell me otherwise." He then presented a carefully doctored log file, one that appeared to show the backdoor being accessed from an external IP address. It was a fabrication, and a clumsy one at that. But to the non-technical eyes of David and the Global Bancorp reps, it looked damning. "I believe," Mark said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "that Leo was attempting to create leverage for himself, a way to ensure his indispensability post-acquisition, perhaps even a tool for corporate espionage." The air was sucked out of the room. I stared at Mark, my mind struggling to process the sheer audacity of the lie. I looked to David, my mentor, expecting him to shut this nonsense down. But I saw only doubt in his eyes. The $2 billion deal had made him skittish. The global Bancorp reps were whispering amongst themselves, their faces hardening. "That's a lie," I said, my voice shaking with a fury I couldn't contain. "I built this system from the ground up. Every line of code is accounted for. I can prove. This is a fabrication. There's no time for that, Mark. Cut in smoothly. The deal is on the line. We need to demonstrate decisive action. I've already engaged a third-party security team to patch the vulnerability." His use of air quotes was a private little insult just for me. And for the sake of confidence in this acquisition, we need to sever ties with the source of the problem. Was a coup? In less than 15 minutes, my 6 years of loyalty, my professional reputation, my entire future at the company I helped build were incinerated. David, caught between his trust in me and his fear of losing the deal, made his choice. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Leo," he said, his voice strained, "I'm sorry. We have to let you go. Your access will be terminated immediately." 2 hours later, I was sitting in my car in the corporate parking lot. A cardboard box of personal effects on the passenger seat. My phone buzzed with a notification from HR. A draconian non-disclosure and non-compete agreement I had to sign to get my severance. Effectively gagging and blacklisting me from my own industry. The hum I had once cherished was gone, replaced by a screaming silence. The shock had subsided, replaced by something colder, heavier, settled in my bones, a chilling resolve. Mark had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he was dealing with a simple programmer. He had forgotten I was. An architect, and architects know how systems are built, and more importantly, how they can be brought down. The first few weeks were a masterclass in professional isolation. The initial trickle of calls from headhunters who had been circling Apex solutions for months dried up overnight. My name was mud. The carefully constructed narrative painted. Me as a disgruntled, reckless engineer who nearly scuttled a multi-billion-dollar deal. Mark hadn't just fired me. He had salted the earth of my career. My first instinct was to fight through official channels. I paid a hefty retainer to a top employment lawyer, a shark named Davis, who listened to my story with a practiced, sympathetic nod. He read the NDA I'd been coerced into signing. "It's an iron cage, Leo," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Mark's story is a lie, but it's their word against yours. They control the servers, the logs, the narrative. Without a smoking gun irrefutable, hard evidence that you can legally obtain, you're looking at a protracted, ruinously expensive legal battle you will almost certainly lose. My advice, take the severance, lick your wounds, and wait for the non-compete to expire." Next, I called Tom Ford, the head of HR. Tom was a corporate lifer. A man whose spine had been replaced by a copy of the employee handbook. "Leo," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "we've conducted our internal review. Company stands by its decision. I really can't discuss this any further." The conversation lasted 90 seconds. Failed, blocked, stonewalled. The system was designed to protect itself, and I was now on the outside. Davis was right. I needed a smoking gun. The system wouldn't give me justice. Would have to find it myself. My professional life had been erased, but my digital ghost remained. I started by mapping out Apex's entire digital infrastructure from memory. They would have scrubbed my primary accounts and revoked my credentials. But a company that grows as fast as Apex always leaves skeletons in its digital closets. Legacy servers, forgotten backup repositories, decommissioned development environments. My mind snagged on Sam. Sam Jones was a junior developer on my team. Brilliant but slightly chaotic coder who I'd had to let go 6 months prior. The official reason was performance issues, but the truth was he'd been a casualty of Mark's budget cuts. I remembered Sam was obsessed with version control, and had set up a private Git repository on an old sandbox server in the early days of Catalyst for rapid prototyping. He argued it was faster than going through the company's bloated official version control system. I had admonished him for it, but had he ever decommissioned it? It was a long shot. I found Sam working for a small startup, a coffee-fueled enterprise where he seemed much happier. We met at a noisy pub, and over a pint I laid out my situation. His initial bitterness over being fired had faded, replaced by a cynical understanding of corporate politics. "Mark Foster," Sam scoffed, shaking his head. "That guy always gave me the creeps. A suit with teeth. So he framed you. And used a piece of your old debug code to do it," I added. Sam's eyes lit up with a spark of vengeful glee. "That old sandbox server? Yeah, I never took it down. The credentials should still be in my old notes." He pulled out his phone, and after a few minutes of scrolling, he slid it across the table. "Don't get caught, Leo. But if you do, you didn't. Get this from me." That night, hunched over my laptop in my darkened home office, I felt a familiar thrill. Using a VPN routed through 3 different countries, I slipped into the forgotten corner of Apex's network. And there it was. Git_archive_dev_02. It was a time capsule. It held pristine early versions of the Catalyst source code, its project wikis, and most importantly, issue tracking logs that had never been migrated to the official system. For 3 days, I barely slept. I was an archaeologist unearthing a buried city. I found the original untampered code that Mark had presented as a backdoor, complete with my own comments explaining its diagnostic function. I found the real source of the rounding error bug in a third-party library that we had documented and patched. I had my proof, but it was still my word against theirs, and the evidence was illegally obtained. I needed more. I needed leverage then. I found the jackpot. It was in a series of technical documents I had authored a year ago, outlining the core architecture of Catalyst. The key was a component I had nicknamed the equilibrium engine. This was the soul of the platform. Didn't just execute trades, dynamically balanced the entire portfolio during periods of extreme market stress, acting as a sophisticated shock absorber. It's prevented the kind of cascading feedback loops that could turn a minor fluctuation into a catastrophic amplifying failure. I cross-referenced this with the patch implemented by Mark's hand-picked security team. My blood ran cold. In their ignorance, guided by Mark's fabricated claims, they hadn't just removed the harmless debug hook. They had ripped out the entire equilibrium engine, mistaking its complex deep system access for the back door. Mark, in his arrogant haste, had disarmed his own weapon of mass destruction. The current version of Catalyst being showcased to Global Bancorp was a time bomb. It would function perfectly under normal market conditions. But under the specific type of volatility spike that the equilibrium engine was designed to handle, a black swan event, it wouldn't just fail. It would actively, algorithmically drive itself off a cliff, executing a torrent of disastrous trades that would vaporize capital in milliseconds. The final piece fell into place when I searched the archived email logs. There it was. It's an email chain between myself and Mark from 8 months ago. I had been arguing for more resources to stress test the equilibrium engine. From Leo.Hayes to Mark.Foster subject, urgent Catalyst volatility stress test Mark. As we discussed, running Catalysts without the full functionality of the equilibrium engine during a high volatility event could lead to a cascading failure. The simulations show potential for exponential negative feedback loops. We need to allocate more testing cycles before we go live. His reply was a monument to his hubris. From Mark.Foster to Leo Hazleo. Your caution is noted. However, the timeline for the acquisition is paramount. We can't afford delays for edge case scenarios. I accept the risk. Focus on the core performance metrics. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. The hum was back, but this time it was a low, dangerous growl. I had the motive, the means, and the evidence. Mark had handed me the blueprints to his own destruction. Now, all I had to do was build the stage. The plan that began to form in my mind was not one of simple revenge. Hacking the system or leaking the data would be crude, illegal, and would only validate Mark's narrative about me. No, this had to be a work of art, a public execution where Mark was both the star and the victim, using the very weapon he thought he controlled. My revenge wouldn't be an act of sabotage. It would be an act of revelation. My target audience was a single person, Dr. Eva Rostova, Quable Bancorp's head of acquisition due diligence. One spent a week researching her. She wasn't a banker. She was a former physicist with a PhD in complex systems. They called her the Ice Queen, notorious for killing deals over the slightest technical discrepancy. She was a woman who spoke the language of data and respected only empirical truth. She was my unwitting instrument of justice. First, however, I needed to test my ability to manipulate the system from the outside. I needed a preliminary strike, a way to clear a potential obstacle and confirm that Apex's internal security was as lax as I suspected. My target, Tom Ford, the HR drone who had so smugly dismissed me. While combing through the old server archives, I had stumbled upon Tom's network drive backups. Tucked away in a mislabeled folder was a complete business plan, client list, and accounting ledger for a management consulting business he was running on the side. Using his company computer, phone, and corporate expense account for client dinners. It was a clear violation of company policy and likely illegal. I drafted a carefully worded, anonymous email. It was concise, professional, and loaded with specific, verifiable details. Dates of meetings, client names, and expense report numbers. I created a new encrypted email address through a secure provider, routed my connection through multiple nodes, and sent it directly to Anna Reed in Apex's compliance department. Anna was a wild card. She was sharp by the book and had a reputation for incorruptibility. I was betting her integrity would outweigh her loyalty to management. For a week, I heard nothing. I began to worry that my tip had been ignored, buried to protect the company from another internal scandal. Then, one Tuesday morning, I saw an update on LinkedIn from a former colleague. Sad to see Tom Ford go. Wish him the best in his future endeavors. He had been quietly terminated. The strike was a success. It confirmed two things. Apex's internal chain of command could be manipulated, and Anna Reed was a true variable. She did her job, no matter who it implicated. She was the ally I didn't know I had. Now for the main event, the Cassandra tip. I needed to feed Dr. Rostova a piece of information that would lead her to run the exact stress test that would trigger Catalyst's catastrophic failure. The tip had to be technically sophisticated enough to be credible, specific enough to be actionable, and anonymous enough to be untraceable. I spent days writing the memo, crafting it not as a whistleblower, but as a concerned high-level quant from a rival firm. I wrote in the dry academic language that a physicist like Rostova would appreciate. I didn't mention the equilibrium engine or any specific vulnerability. Instead, I framed it as a theoretical market event. Subject: unsolicited analysis regarding high-frequency trading platform. Stress testing Rostova, my analysis of recent market microtrends suggests a potential for a new type of flash crash event, triggered by a confluence of high-volume algorithmic trading and a sudden, sharp reversal in currency futures. I've modeled a simulation, attached below, which I believe represents a plausible, if low probability, black swan scenario. Any trading platform being evaluated for large-scale deployment should be able to withstand this specific sequence of inputs without generating feedback. Cascades. The simulation parameters I attached were, of course, a precise recipe for disaster, engineered to overload the very functions the equilibrium engine once protected. It was a loaded gun, presented as a safety inspection. Sending it was the point of no return. This wasn't just about exposing Tom's petty corruption anymore. If I was wrong, I would look like a fool. If I was right, I would be detonating a $2 billion deal, potentially costing hundreds of innocent people their jobs. The moral complexity of it weighed on me. I sat in front of my screen for a full hour, the cursor blinking over the send button. I saw Mark's smug face in that conference room, heard David's strained voice casting me aside. This wasn't just for me. It was for the team whose work he stole, for Sam, who he'd cast off, for the very integrity of the craft he had perverted for. His own gain. My finger clicked the mouse. The email disappeared into the ether. The wait was agonizing. Days turned into a week. The acquisition's final approval was scheduled for a Friday. The deal was proceeding. Started to fear that Rist had dismissed my tip as crank mail. Perhaps Mark's charm had even worked on the Ice Queen. Then, on Thursday afternoon, the day before the final presentation, I received an alert from a news service I subscribed to. It was a minor press release from Global Bancorp announcing the final board presentation and live demonstration of the Catalyst platform would be webcast for major shareholders the next day. Tucked into the bottom of the schedule was a new agenda item, comprehensive Black Swan event simulation, led by Dr. Eva Rostova. She had taken the bait. My Cassandra tip was now on the official schedule. My heart hammered in my chest. Tomorrow, in front of the entire world, Mark Foster would take the stage to present his stolen masterpiece. And I, from the shadows, would hand him the shovel to dig his own grave. The morning of the presentation, my apartment was a command center. I had the official shareholder webcast running on my main monitor, a live feed of financial news on a second, and an encrypted chat window open on my laptop. The contact in the window was labeled Compliance. After Tom's dismissal, Anna Reed had sent a single cryptic message to the anonymous email account I'd used. Thank you for the information. It appears our systems have several areas that warrant further review. I had replied with a simple, "You're welcome." Now, she was my eyes and ears inside the boardroom. The webcast began. The camera panned across a gleaming mahogany table. On one side sat the stoic, severe board of Global Bancorp, with Dr. Rostova at their head, her face an unreadable mask. On the other side sat David Shaw and the board of Apex Solutions, looking like eager supplicants. And there at the podium was Mark Foster. He was radiant, basking in the spotlight. He was a vision of corporate success, his voice smooth and confident. As he walked the assembly through Catalyst's performance metrics, its profitability, its genius. My genius. And now, Mark announced with a flourish for a live demonstration of Catalyst's power. We will feed it real-time market data and watch as it navigates the complexities of today's trading environment. Anna, he's so smug, I think. I can smell his cologne from here. I typed back a single word. Wait, the system fired up. On the webcast, I could see the elegant user interface I designed, displaying charts and executing small, profitable trades. It was working flawlessly. A knot of doubt tightened in my stomach. What if I was wrong? What if his tech team had found their mistake and quietly re-implemented the equilibrium engine? Then, Dr. Rostova leaned into her microphone. "Mr. Foster," she said, her voice cutting through the room's polite applause. An impressive display. However, as per the agenda, my team will now initiate our simulation. Mark's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Of course, Dr. Rostova. We welcome the challenge. Our system is robust. It is prepared for any eventuality. Had no idea what was coming. Anna, she's not messing around. They're piping the data directly into the system core, bypassing the normal ingestion filters. Me. That's the trigger. On screen, the clean, orderly graphs began to twitch. The simulated market data, my carefully crafted recipe for chaos, was flooding the system. For the first 30 seconds, nothing happened. Catalyst adjusted, rebalancing as it was designed to. Mark looked relieved, shooting a triumphant glance. At Dr. Rostova dot, and then it happened. The simulation hit the precise inflection point I had designed. A sharp, fabricated reversal in currency futures cascaded into the equity markets, without the equilibrium engine to act as a brake. Catalyst didn't just fail to adapt, interpreted the volatility as a valid, exploitable trend. A single red line on the profit-loss chart dipped. Then it plunged. The system, devoid of its stabilizing soul, entered a feedback loop. It began executing a frantic, insane series of trades, trying to correct a problem by making it exponentially worse. It was selling into a downturn, shorting stocks at their nadir, multiplying losses at a rate that defied logic. It was a digital brain aneurysm, live on international webcast. The room fell silent. The webcast showed billions in simulated losses racking up on the main screen. $2 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion. The numbers spun like a demonic slot machine. Mark stood frozen at the podium, his face ashen. "It's an error in the display," He stammered. "A glitch in the simulation feed." "The feed is clean," Dr. Rostova stated coldly. "What we are witnessing is the behavior of your platform, Mr. Foster." This was the moment. I sent my final message to Anna. Now, and here came the twist I hadn't planned for. A moment of strategic brilliance that belonged entirely to her. She didn't just leak the email, she weaponized it. She stood up, feigning helpfulness. "David, perhaps we should consult the original system architecture documents." "To find the source of the error," she said, her voice filled with professional concern. "I believe Leo Hayes sent Mark a warning about something like this." Ellie just pull it up on the main screen. Before anyone could object, she had taken control of the presentation screen. The view of the catastrophic losses was replaced by a crystal clear image of my email thread with Mark. My urgent warning about a cascading failure and negative feedback loops was displayed for everyone to see. And right below it, Mark's arrogant, damning reply, "I accept the risk." A collective gasp went through the room. It was no longer a system failure. It was a conspiracy. Mark hadn't been ignorant. He had been negligent. He had deliberately endangered the company's prize asset to meet a deadline. The CEO of Global Bancorp, a grim-faced man named Price, stood up. He didn't shout. His voice was low and lethal. "This meeting is over. The offer is withdrawn. We will be speaking to our lawyers about the misrepresentations made during this process." Mark looked around the room, his eyes wild with panic. He saw no allies, only the cold, unforgiving stares of the boards, the quiet fury of David Shaw, and the icy contempt of Dr. Rostova. He had been publicly, professionally, and comprehensively executed. The webcast feed abruptly cut to a global Bancorp logo. I leaned back in my chair, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving behind a profound, hollow quiet. It was done. I didn't feel the elation I had anticipated. There was no triumphant fist pump, no shout of victory. There was only the cold, clean satisfaction of a perfectly balanced equation. Justice had been delivered. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Apex Solutions became a case study in corporate implosion. With the Global Bancorp deal dead, the company's stock price cratered by over 80% in a single day. Shareholder lawsuits piled up like cordwood, naming Mark Foster and the entire board as defendants. David Shaw, his reputation shredded, was forced to resign within a week. The company was eventually carved up and sold for parts, a sad and ignominious end for a place that had once been so full of promise. Mark Foster simply vanished. His corporate biography was scrubbed from the internet, his LinkedIn profile deleted. I heard through the grapevine that he was facing potential SEC investigations for misleading investors. He was a pariah, a ghost in the machine he had tried to master. His greed had cost him everything. Proportional justice. I spent the next few weeks decompressing, taking long walks, and reconnecting with a world outside of code and revenge. I reflected on the path I had taken. I had bent rules, crossed ethical lines, and manipulated people even for a just cause. There was a part of me that was uncomfortable with the cold, calculating strategist I had become. But there was a larger part that felt a sense of profound vindication. I had been judged by my competence, and in the end, my competence had been my sword and shield. My professional honor was intact. 2 weeks after the demo, my phone rang. The caller ID was a main switchboard number from New York. "Is this Leo Hayes?" the familiar, precise voice asked. "It is," I said. "This is Dr. Eva Rostova." I felt a jolt, but kept my voice steady. "Dr. Rostova, I'm surprised to hear from you." "Please, Leo, call me Eva," she said. There was a hint of dry amusement in her tone. "I'm a physicist. I appreciate elegant solutions. What you did, it was a masterpiece of asymmetrical warfare." The Cassandra tip was a particularly nice touch. It took my data scientists 2 days to reverse engineer how perfectly it was tailored. I stayed silent, admitting, "Nothing. I don't care about your methods," she continued. "I care about your results. You identified a fatal flaw that my own teams missed, and you proved in no uncertain terms that you understand risk at a level few people do. You're also the architect of what was, before it was lobotomized, the most innovative trading platform I've seen in a decade." She paused. "Global Bancorp is no longer acquiring a platform. We're going to build our own, a better one. Need someone to lead that effort. Someone who won't just build the engine, but will also know how to keep it from flying apart. The job is yours if you want it. Full autonomy. Name your price." A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't the cold smirk of a victor, but the warm, genuine smile of a man who had navigated the storm and found a new shore. My skills had been validated, my worth proven not by whispers and lies, but by a public demonstration of undeniable truth. "I'll send you my resume," I said. The following Monday, I walked through the gleaming glass doors of the Global Bancorp Tower in Manhattan. I wasn't a disgraced engineer or a vengeful outcast. I was the new head of quantitative strategy, brought in to build the future. I had lost my company, but I had regained my career, my reputation, and my self-respect. Mark Forster had tried to erase me from the equation. In the end, he had only succeeded in solving 4x, and the answer was me.